Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, January 2nd, 2025. FBI in New Orleans says the deadly attack New Year's Eve, where the suspect ran down victims with a pickup truck, killing 14, injuring over 30 more, was an act of terrorism 100% inspired by ISIS, and the suspect acted alone. While in Las Vegas, about that Tesla Cybertruck explosion the same day outside the Trump Hotel, authorities are tentatively identifying the deceased suspect as an active-duty military member. It's tentative because the body was burned severely. They also say he had a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head, and at this point, no known motive. Coming up, we get the latest on the investigations from President Joe Biden, who met with his security team today at the White House, and from FBI and law enforcement in New Orleans and Las Vegas. 119th Congress convenes on Friday. Speaker Mike Johnson expressing optimism he'll be reelected to another term as Speaker by convincing enough House Republicans who are on the fence to vote for him. He can only afford to lose a single vote given the super slim majority. We'll talk about the first day of Congress, the Speaker's race, and the proposed Republican changes to House rules, including making it more difficult to remove a Speaker, with Thérèse Boudreaux, Congressional Reporter with the Center Square. Plus, President Biden celebrates an accomplishment of his four-year presidency a few weeks before it ends. 235 Article III judicial nominees confirmed, one more than President-elect Donald Trump's first term. President Biden writing on X, "Today I convene Vice President and my Homeland Security team to discuss the investigations into the terrorist attack in New Orleans and the car explosion in Las Vegas. We're making every resource available to law enforcement to ensure there are no remaining threats to Americans." A few hours later, he gave an update.
I want to give an update on the investigations into yesterday's terrorist attacks in New Orleans and the truck explosion in Las Vegas. I've just come from the meeting, not just to spend, while we prepare these remarks, better part of an hour, from my Homeland Security team. The number of people killed in New Orleans has risen to 15, including the attacker. 35 people were injured. Today, the FBI briefed me that as of now, we have no information that anyone else is involved in the attack. They've established that the attacker was the same person who planted the explosives in those ice coolers in two nearby locations in the French Quarter just a few hours before he rammed into the crowd with his vehicle. They assess he had a remote detonator in his vehicle to set off those two ice chests. So there's no question that, remember all the talk about other people were involved, placed in, they have established he's there, and even established that he had a detonator to explode those ice chests. As I said yesterday, the attacker posted several videos just several hours before the attack, indicating his strong support for ISIS. Federal law enforcement and the intelligence community are actively investigating any foreign or domestic contacts and connections that could possibly be relevant to the attack. And so we're also continuing to investigate whether or not there's any connection between the New Orleans attack and the explosion in Las Vegas. As of now, they've just been briefed. They have not found any evidence of such a connection thus far. I've directed them to keep looking. The individual who rented the truck that exploded in Las Vegas also served as active duty U.S. Army. And the FBI is working with the Department of Defense on investigating, including the service members' possible motives and all those he worked with, who served with him, what things he'd say and do. I directed my team to accelerate these investigations so we have answers to our unanswered questions. They're making every single resource available to get the job done. And we're going to share the facts as soon as I learn them so the American public doesn't have to wonder. In the meantime, like I said last night, New Orleans is a city of tremendous spirit. You can't keep it down. You really can't. And we're seeing that today. The Sugar Bowl is back on. Kickoff is going to take off very shortly. If I don't get this damn thing done, we're going to be in real trouble. And the FBI has handed control of Bourbon Street back to local officials. Security of the area has been reinforced, and they should be open for business later today, the Bourbon Street. People in New Orleans are sending an unmistakable message. They will not let this attack or the attackers' deluded ideology overcome us. None of us should fear that it will overcome us. We're going to continue to relentlessly pursue ISIS and other terrorist organizations where they are, and they'll find no safe harbor here. I'll continue to provide updates in New Orleans and Las Vegas as the facts develop.
President Biden at the White House today. It was the start of an event on a different subject, judicial nominations confirmed by the Senate in his 4 years in office. Story from The Hill. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, is asking the Senate Homeland Security Committee to call on Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and FBI Director Christopher Wray to testify after the New Orleans attack. Hawley sent a letter to incoming chair of the committee, Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, emphasizing Biden administration officials cannot shirk public accountability as President Biden's term ends. Hawley said he wants a full account of this attack and any failures by the departments highlighted. That was from The Hill. President-elect Donald Trump posting on Truth Social, with the Biden open borders policy, I said many times during rallies and elsewhere that radical Islamic terrorism and other forms of violent crime will become so bad in America that it will become hard to even imagine or believe. That time has come, only worse than ever imagined. Joe Biden is the worst president in the history of America, a complete and total disaster. What he and his group of election-interfering thugs have done to our country will not soon be forgotten. MAGA, that post by President-elect Donald Trump. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, said something similar this morning on Fox News.
We all know that for the last 4 years, the Biden administration has been completely derelict in its duty. The congressional Republicans, we here in the House and the Senate, have repeatedly asked the DHS under the Biden administration about the correlation, the obvious concern about terrorism and the wide open border. The idea that dangerous people were coming here in droves and setting up potentially terrorist cells around the country. We have been ringing the alarms. We impeached DHS Secretary Mayorkas in the House over that very issue and others related to it. So this is a big concern. They told us, Lawrence, for 4 years that the number one threat was so-called racially motivated extremism. It was nonsense. This is the thing that we were all concerned about. This is why we raised the alarms. This is why we passed H.R. 2, the strongest border security act ever passed by Congress. And Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate would not put that through and make it into law. The Biden administration has a lot to account for here, and we see now in glaring view of everybody that this dereliction of duty has real consequences. It's a concern, and it will be an ongoing concern for some time.
House Speaker Mike Johnson this morning on Fox News. WWL-TV in New Orleans writes New Orleanians are grappling with the aftermath of a deadly New Year's Day terror attack on Bourbon Street. At a press conference on Thursday, officials released more details on 42-year-old Shamsuddin Bahar Jabbar and announced that Bourbon Street would reopen before the Sugar Bowl kicks off at 3 p.m. The attack claimed the lives of 15 people, including the suspect, and injured about 30 others. Federal authorities are investigating the incident as an act of terrorism. The FBI said in a news conference Thursday they no longer believe anyone else was involved in the attack. Police said Jabbar deliberately steered his pickup truck into the crowd, bypassing a police barricade. Jabbar, a U.S. Army veteran from Texas, engaged in a shootout with police after crashing his vehicle. 2 officers were injured and remain in stable condition. Jabbar was killed during the exchange. Guns and pipe bombs were found in Jabbar's vehicle, concealed in coolers and wired for remote detonation, authorities said. That was from WWL-TV. Here's one of the briefers at today's news conference in New Orleans, Christopher Wray, Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counterterrorism Division.
I first, and most importantly, want to send our deepest condolences to the victims of this horrific attack and their loved ones. 14 innocent victims were killed in this senseless attack, and at least 35 are injured. We cannot ease the grief people in this community and across the nation are feeling at this time, but rest assured, we stand with you and in support of you. All the resources, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later, all the resources of the FBI are being focused on tracking down every piece of evidence, every lead, every interview, every potential lead we've got. While I won't be able to answer all your questions today, my goal is to be as forthcoming as possible with you on what we've uncovered so far. First and foremost, let me be very clear about this point. This was an act of terrorism. It was premeditated and an evil act. This was obviously a critical incident, and with that, lots of information and tips come pouring in from law enforcement, first responders, and the public. We have been aggressively running down these tips and information. As you all know, that takes time, and we will continue to do so until every lead has been followed through on. This investigation is only a little more than 24 hours old. So I ask you to keep in mind that as I go through some of the specifics later. But at this point, currently, and this is another fact I want to be clear on, we do not assess at this point that anyone else involved in this attack except for Shamsuddin Jabbar, the subject you've already been briefed on. A little bit about what the FBI is doing. So we are surging people and assets to the area from across the region and across the nation. Special agents in multiple field offices across the country have been deployed and are assisting with potential aspects of this investigation and following up on every lead. Additional teams of special agents, professional staff, and victim specialists continue to arrive to provide more investigative power and assistance to the victims and their families. We've also forward deployed a number of our critical incident response group assets, including members of our hostage rescue team, special agent bomb technicians, and crisis management coordinators. In addition, we have deployed more evidence response technicians to continue to process the various scenes that we have. So far, we have received just over 400 tips from the public, and that information is being followed up on both here in New Orleans and across the country. Some of the tips are here in New Orleans, and there are other tips in other states across the country that we are following up on. The FBI team and our law enforcement partners here are also reviewing hundreds of hours of surveillance and other video from both the French Quarter and other locations. As for a timeline, at this point, investigators believe Jabbar picked up the rented F-150 in Houston, Texas on December 30th. He then drove from Houston to New Orleans on the evening of the 31st, and he posted several videos to an online platform proclaiming his support for ISIS. There were 5 videos posted on Jabbar's Facebook account, which are time-stamped beginning at 1:29 a.m. and the last at 3:02 a.m. In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote. Additionally, he stated he had joined ISIS before this summer. He also provided a will and testament.
Christopher Rea, Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counterterrorism Division, part of his opening statement at today's news conference in New Orleans. He also said there is no evidence that the suspect was wearing a suicide vest. That's been reported in some media. And also, at this point, there is no link to the Tesla Cybertruck explosion the same day in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, but that is still being investigated. One of the questions to Christopher Rea was why the suspect chose Bourbon Street, New Orleans, New Year's Eve.
How he became radicalized over all of this time, what brought him to Bourbon Street? Do we understand was there any international travel involved? What led him down this path to this sort of radicalization?
Sure, a lot of questions we're still asking ourselves. We know that he specifically picked out Bourbon Street. Not quite sure why. I mean, I think one can assume that it was lots of people New Year's Eve, with a target for an attack. That's the stuff in the coming days as far as that path to radicalization that we're really going to be digging into and making a priority of. So what I can tell you right now is that he was 100% inspired by ISIS, and so we're digging through more of the social media, more interviews, working with some of our other partners to ascertain just how to ascertain a little bit more about that connection.
Christopher Rea from the FBI's Counterterrorism Division at a news conference in New Orleans. Also at the news conference, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry, a Republican, and New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell, a Democrat. talking about safety and recovery. First, Governor Landry.
I first want to start off by reminding the citizens of Louisiana that as you travel around the state, you will see the flags of all state buildings at half-mast in honor of those lives that were lost in this horrific act of violence. I also think that it's important to remember that what happened yesterday was akin to those who are old enough to remember jigsaw puzzles, and that you would take a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and you empty the box, and you've got to start sifting through those pieces, and you want to start, if you're real good, you start at the corners, right? Try to put your corners together. And from yesterday to today, over 1,000 law enforcement agents and officers, men and women, have been poring over countless amounts of data, of videos, of surveillances, interviews, tracking down every possible lead that came to us, whether it was the New Orleans Police Department, the Louisiana State Police, the FBI, or our other federal agencies. Also yesterday, I issued an emergency declaration. That declaration was meant to streamline resources and communications between state, local, and federal partners. And we're seeing the results of it. I also would like to remind everyone that what's going on in this city and this state is twofold. We've got an active criminal investigation going on, while we're also continuing to secure the city in preparation for 3 o'clock kickoff time for the Sugar Bowl.
Governor Jeff Landry, Republican from Louisiana, at today's news conference in New Orleans with the FBI and ATF about the deadly truck ramming attack. The city mayor, LaToya Cantrell, Democrat, also spoke.
The city of New Orleans, we're resilient. And as I stated on yesterday, my focus in terms of a priority has been on our victims. As you've heard, that yes, the FBI was able to clear Bourbon Street. And what that meant also for me in this city was that we were able to remove our victims, identify them, and notify their families. Real reverence. They mattered, the families matter, and matter to the city of New Orleans. In addition to that, I want to just thank again our federal partners in Washington, listening to my plea personally for the additional resources to allow for the scene to be cleared, and again, attending to our victims. I walked by each one, and I did the sign of cross in my own way, because reverence, again, is important. So while we have been able to have Bourbon Street returned back to the city of New Orleans, and the due diligence has been done, that then allowed me to give the go-ahead to begin the cleaning of Bourbon Street. That started happening in the morning about 2 a.m. It was completed before 8 a.m. this morning. But that has really set the tone, I would say, and with the confidence that I have in the law enforcement partners, all of the resources that have been activated, how we have made sure that safety continues to be our top priority, how our assets have been deployed strategically, again, for the safety and the protection of our visitors and our residents in the city. And because of that, the confidence is there to reopen Bourbon Street to the public prior to game time today.
New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell at a press conference in New Orleans. This is Washington Today. Turning to the Las Vegas incident, this from AP, the highly decorated Army soldier inside the Tesla Cybertruck that burst into flames outside President-elect Donald Trump's Las Vegas hotel shot himself in the head before the explosion and likely planned to cause more damage, but the explosive was rudimentary and the steel-sided vehicle absorbed much of the force, officials said Thursday. Clark County Sheriff Kevin McMahill emphasized that official IDs were found in the truck, but the body was so badly burned that they cannot be sure that this is the suspect.
A military identification. We also found a passport. We found a Desert Eagle 50 caliber semi-automatic pistol. And if you'll notice on a lot of these guns that we're going to talk about here, they're almost just burnt beyond recognition as well. There's a SLR model B30 semi-automatic firearm. Number of fireworks that were still in the vehicle that had to be removed. Notably, we found an iPhone and a smartwatch, and then several credit cards were also in the name of our subject. Our subject is 37-year-old Matthew Livelsberger. He's of Colorado Springs, Colorado, born July 22nd of 1987. Now, as you'll see here on a picture of his driver's license, let's see, the question really still remains for me, and I know that there's a lot of you folks in the media that are identifying this person as a person in our vehicle. As I mentioned to you already, his body is burnt beyond recognition, and I do still not have confirmation 100% that that is the individual that was inside of our vehicle. And so as I'm calling it now, the subject or person of interest, I will not come back until I have the confirmation through DNA or medical records that this is indeed, in fact, the subject inside of the vehicle. Now, further complicating this identification of this individual, we also discovered through the coroner's office that the individual had sustained a gunshot wound to the head prior to the detonation of the vehicle. One of the handguns was found at his feet inside of the vehicle.
Sheriff Kevin McMahill at today's news conference in Las Vegas. He also spoke about the speculation, so far not substantiated, that this attack and the one in New Orleans on the same day may be connected.
I would like to acknowledge a couple of things because I know what's going on in the social media world, and there are a number of things in this case that are similar to the attack in New Orleans. We do know that our subject here served in the military. In fact, he's a current member of the military. Both of the subjects served at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. What we do know about that is it's a very large military base, and we have no record that they served in the same unit or even at the same years at Fort Bragg, something that continues to remain under investigation. I also know that they both served in Afghanistan in 2009. We don't have any evidence that they were in the same province in Afghanistan, the same location, or the same unit. Again, something else that remains under investigation. And we also know, of course, that they both used the rental company Turo to rent their vehicles. As far as his military background, it's been confirmed by DOD that he was indeed in the United States Army. He was also a Green Beret operations sergeant who spent most of his time at Fort Carson, Colorado, and in Germany. He was on approved leave from Germany, where he was serving with the 10th Special Forces Group. He was also previously in the National Guard and the Army Reserve.
Kevin McMahill, Clark County, Nevada Sheriff at today's news conference in Las Vegas. He also said that Elon Musk, owner of Tesla, and a Tesla Cybertruck was used in this attack, has sent a team to try and capture video from inside the truck. Spencer Evans, special agent in charge, FBI Las Vegas field office, was at today's news conference and was asked by a reporter why the suspect did what he did.
David Charles, KLAS TV. There was, you have a gentleman in a Cybertruck, Trump Hotel. There's information that the FBI was in Colorado Springs last night, possibly at this gentleman's home. Any information about why?
I think I'll let Spencer answer that question.
So as I mentioned, the motivation at this point is unknown. We are, as I mentioned earlier, following investigative leads both domestically and internationally as well. And so that includes search warrants and witness interviews, collecting forensic information, and basically trying to compile the facts. And so there's investigative activity taking place literally around the globe, trying to determine what the potential nexus is. But at this time, at this particular moment in time, as the sheriff aptly said, we have to focus on what we know and what we don't know. We know we have a bombing, absolutely, and it's a bombing that certainly has factors that raise concern. It's not lost on us that it's in front of, of the Trump building, that it's a Tesla vehicle, but we don't have information at this point that definitively tells us or suggests it was because of this particular ideology or any of the reasoning behind it. That's the purpose of the investigation that we're conducting, is to get to the bottom of exactly what happened, why and how.
Spencer Evans, Special Agent in Charge, FBI Las Vegas Field Office, at a news conference today in Las Vegas. You can find the video in its entirety of this news conference and a news conference as well by the FBI and local law enforcement and elected officials in New Orleans at our video library, cspan.org. New York City Mayor Eric Adams, a Democrat, posting on X after the attacks in New Orleans and Las Vegas. The New York Police Department Commissioner and I have been in constant communication. While there are no immediate threats to our city at this time, out of an abundance of caution, we have heightened security and have increased NYPD presence at relevant locations, including at Trump Tower and in Times Square. And the mayor also posting in reference to a shooting that happened in Queens outside a nightclub where at least 10 people were hit by 3 or 4 gunmen. It was a private event in the club, happened Wednesday night. Mayor Adams writes, an evening of celebration ended with senseless violence overnight at a venue in Queens. I want to be clear, this incident has no connection to the terrorism investigations elsewhere in our country. As we have said, there's no room for this criminal behavior in our city, and we are determined to bring these dangerous individuals to justice and get illegal guns off our streets. My prayers are with the victims and their families. And from WJLA-TV in Washington, D.C., this story, a man who drove his vehicle along a sidewalk and onto a grassy area near the U.S. Capitol building Thursday morning was arrested for reckless driving in an incident that showcased heightened security tensions around D.C. early into the new year. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Witness democracy in action with C-SPAN. Experience history as it unfolds with C-SPAN's live coverage this January. As Republicans take control of both chambers of Congress, and a new chapter begins with the swearing in of the 47th President of the United States. On Friday, January 3rd, don't miss the opening day of the 119th Congress. Watch the election of the House Speaker, the swearing in of new members of Congress and the Senate, and the first day of leadership for South Dakota's John Thune as the new Senate Majority Leader. On Monday, January 6th, live from the House chamber, witness Vice President Kamala Harris preside over the certification of the Electoral College vote, where this historic session will officially confirm Donald Trump as the winner of the 2024 presidential election. And on January 20th, tune in for our live all-day coverage of the presidential inauguration as Donald Trump takes the oath of office, becoming the 47th President of the United States. Stay with C-SPAN throughout January for comprehensive, live, unfiltered coverage of the 119th Congress and the presidential inauguration. C-SPAN. Democracy unfiltered. Created by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. With less than 24 hours left until the start of the 119th Congress, begins a Politico article. Mike Johnson doesn't have the votes yet to remain Speaker. The Louisiana Republican has been working diligently over the past few days to lock down the 218 votes he needs, even after spending the holidays working the phones and meeting with incoming President-elect Donald Trump. But even the incoming president's repeated endorsement earlier this week doesn't mean Johnson is guaranteed a victory. Roughly a dozen Republicans are still on the fence, as some of them try to get concessions on the rules or commitments from Johnson on spending. There are some positive signs for the Speaker. In addition to Trump's restated backing, Johnson has managed to keep his official no votes to only one so far, Thomas Massie of Kentucky. One notable holdout, Paul Gosar of Arizona, is back in Johnson's camp. Plus, despite multiple conservatives expressing reservations about Johnson, there's not a clear alternative candidate who could get the votes. That was from Politico. Speaker Mike Johnson said on Fox News this morning that he expects he will get another term as Speaker.
We're going to get this done. Look, I'm humbled and honored to have President Trump's endorsement for the role again, as well as the endorsement of leaders across the conservative spectrum and the Republican Party, all of my colleagues that are standing with us, and we will get this done. Look, the things that we're talking about this morning are an illustration that we live in very serious times. We cannot afford any palace drama here. We have got to get the Congress started, which begins tomorrow, and we have to get immediately to work. We have to certify the election of President Donald J. Trump on January 6th, on Monday. And we have many important things pressing on us right now. So there's no time to waste. We have to stay unified. The American people gave us a mandate. You know, President Trump got 77 million votes. We got almost 75 million for House Republicans, the largest number ever. And they have sent us a message that they want us to begin fixing all of this, and we will, and we're excited to do that.
Mr. Speaker, some of your members, especially within the House Freedom Caucus, have said they're not going to vote for you. So have you talked with them, had private conversations? Have they committed? Have they reversed that decision? Because it's a numbers game.
Yeah, it's a numbers game. We have the smallest margin in U.S. history. We'll have a margin of probably 2 votes tomorrow during that, so can only afford to lose 1 or 2. But I think we'll get it done. I really do, Lawrence. I've talked to every single one of those friends and colleagues over the holidays. We'll be talking about process reforms inside the House, and I've encouraged all of them, and I think the reason they're all going to vote yes is this. We're shifting into a brand new paradigm. We have unified government that begins tomorrow. We have the White House, the Senate, and the House, a totally different situation than we dealt with over the last 14 months since I've been Speaker.
Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, on Fox News this morning. Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, Democrat from New Mexico, posted a video from the airport on the way to Washington, talking about the Speaker's race and other business on Friday during the opening of the 119th Congress.
Hey everyone, and Happy New Year. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday. I am here at the Denver airport. I am in transit. I am on my way back to Washington, D.C. Tomorrow is swearing-in day for the 119th Congress, and it may be a doozy. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We are returning with 217 GOP members and 215 Democratic members. There's already at least one, maybe more members of the GOP that don't know if they're going to vote for Johnson for Speaker. Of course, we will be voting for Hakeem Jeffries to be our next leader. And after we're sworn in, we will be taking a vote not only on Speaker, but also on a very controversial rules package. Unfortunately, our friends across the aisle did not simmer down on their efforts to bring these crazy bills forward, and unfortunately they've actually included them in a must-pass rules package. It includes a lot of dangerous bills around deportation rules, transgender athletes. It's all the stuff we've seen before. So I think we're in for a bumpy ride, but I'm excited to get back to Washington. I'm excited to be back representing the good people of New Mexico and to be in the fight. And I am sending you all so much love. I will see you on the other side, and we'll be sending updates over the coming days as swearing in happens. And hopefully we have a new leadership, and we'll see you all soon. See you, everyone.
Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, Democrat from New Mexico, in a video. An article by Thérèse Boudreaux, Congressional Reporter with The Center Square, begins. Republicans have released a new House rules package for the incoming 119th Congress that is packed with political wish list items. It would also make ousting the House Speaker more difficult. She joins us now by phone. Thanks for being with us. Let's start with the ousting of the Speaker. What is the change?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So most notably, the bill makes it harder. So the current rules allow a single lawmaker to force a vote to vacate the chair. And this is how former Speaker Kevin McCarthy was ousted last Congress, and then Johnson was voted in. But the proposed resolution would allow only members of the majority party to introduce a motion to vacate, and it would require at least 8 co-sponsors from that party as well. So this would make it a lot more difficult to oust the House Speaker. But Democrats are definitely concerned about that, and some lawmakers have called it out, especially Representative Jim McGovern from Massachusetts. He was saying, "Oh, this is not a good thing," essentially, and that it does not show a spirit of bipartisanship.
Also, tomorrow we're going to have an election of a speaker, and it's a little uncertain now whether Speaker Johnson will continue. He sounded confident today. What have you been hearing?
So Johnson is in a very vulnerable position right now with such a slim Republican majority in the House, and mostly because he's facing opposition from some in his own party. So Thomas Massie, for instance, has said unequivocally he is not voting for Johnson. A lot of the opposition comes from how Johnson originally negotiated with Democrats over the continuing resolution back in December to keep the government open. A lot of Republicans, including Chip Roy, who also is kind of on the fence, it seems, with whether to vote for Johnson's reelection. But lawmakers, including him, Republican lawmakers, think that Johnson essentially folded to Democrats in the first edition, which had a lot of Democrat wish list items. Now, that did not ultimately pass. That was not the version of the continuing resolution that passed, but it kind of left a bitter taste in a lot of Republicans' mouths. And so there are a couple who are either on the fence or have said that we're not going to vote for Johnson. And it could be as little. Johnson can afford to lose more than 2 votes. There have been punchbowl news, for instance, reported that Donald Trump has been in contact with Chip Roy, because it's Roy and Massie who are kind of the wild cards. Massie at this point just does not seem like he's going to budge, but Roy is at this point kind of he could be one of the deciding votes. So yeah, it's really uncertain how it's going to play out, but we'll see.
We're talking with Thérèse Boudreaux from the Center Square. Back to the House Rules package, assuming that they do elect a speaker and they move on to that. You talked about this political wish list that's within it. What do the Republicans plan with that?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of stuff. The package, the resolution itself, one of the things it would do, besides change the way that speakers can be ousted, is it would dissolve the Congressional Diversity and Inclusion Office, formed in 2020. Republicans have been wanting to abolish that for a while. It would also authorize subpoenas of Attorney General Merrick Garland and some of the other officials and people connected to the investigation of the Biden family finances. And there are a few other things as well, but there's also 12 bills that would be considered separately that are tacked on, and they'd be considered under a closed rule, which means that no amendment could be introduced. And those include a lot of Republican objectives. So some of them, one of them includes it would require proof of U.S. citizenship when an individual registers to vote in federal elections. One of them relates to Title IX. It would ensure that biological sex distinctions in sports are protected or insured under the Title IX rules. And then there's a lot having to do with border security and how migrants who commit crimes in the United States are treated, whether they can be deported or taken into custody. And then also there's some that are just very there's some that seem completely unrelated. There's one that would prohibit moratoriums on hydraulic fracking. There's another that would require physicians to provide the proper degree of care for infants born alive after failed abortions. So it really is just a list of quite a few Republican objectives. But even though these are all rather partisan, there is a little Republican opposition to some of them. So one in particular, there is a bill within those 12 bills that would allow the U.S. government to impose sanctions on the International Criminal Court if the tribunal goes after any protected person of the United States and its allies. Now, that would include Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, whom the court is investigating for possible war crimes. And so Massey, again, he said on X on Wednesday, essentially, why is this in here? Where are our priorities? So it's also, again, it's also unknown how many of those will pass, or if any will pass.
Thérèse Boudreaux, congressional reporter with The Center Square. You can find her articles at thecentersquare.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And join the C-SPAN networks on Friday for the opening of the 119th Congress. It'll happen beginning at 7 a.m. Eastern with the Washington Journal on C-SPAN. We'll have an extended version all the way until the House and Senate convene for the new Congress at noon Eastern. The House on C-SPAN, the Senate on C-SPAN 2, and C-SPAN will also have its own cameras in the House chamber providing special coverage. From CBS News, President Biden marked the 235 confirmations he secured during his single term in the White House, a figure that surpasses that of his predecessor, President-elect Donald Trump. Joined by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Judiciary Committee Chair Dick Durbin, Mr. Biden delivered remarks from the White House highlighting the judges that he had nominated and the Democrat-led Senate confirmed to the federal bench. He said these represent the best of America. That was from CBS News. Here is the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer talking about the legacy of those judicial nominations.
First, let me begin by thanking President Biden. We are here today because of your leadership, Mr. President. With President Biden working by our side, Senate Democrats have confirmed 235 judges, more than any majority has confirmed in decades. This is historic. We've confirmed more judges than were confirmed under the previous administration, so something no one thought we could do. In fact, we confirmed more judges than under any administration going back decades. When people look back at the most consequential accomplishments of the last 4 years, two things will stand out. The legislation we passed between 2021 and 2022, and the historic judges we confirmed to the bench. Now, these are amazing accomplishments. Even more importantly, these judges come just in time. Our democracy faces an uncertain future, and many people are rightly worried. We hear incoming leaders say things about undercutting the well springs of our democracy that make many Americans anxious. The good news is that these judges will be a barrier against attacks on our democratic institutions. At the district level, these judges will have the first and often decisive impact on cases involving voting rights in elections and democracy writ large. Thanks to these judges, it is now far more likely today than it was just a few years ago that these attacks on democracy will be blunted. In short, these judges will be the shield that protects our democracy.
The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrats from New York, at today's White House event with President Biden. From the Washington Post, President Biden on Thursday is awarding the Presidential Citizens Medal to former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, honoring one of President-elect Donald Trump's most outspoken critics at a White House ceremony less than 3 weeks before Trump is set to reclaim the presidency. The medal, given to those who have performed exemplary deeds of service for their country, is the nation's second highest award after the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Biden is also giving the medal to Congressman Benny Thompson, Democrat of Mississippi, who, along with Cheney, led the House committee that investigated the January 6, 2021 assault on the U.S. Capitol. That was from the Washington Post. In all today, there were 20 people getting the Presidential Citizens Medal. Here is the point in the ceremony where former Congresswoman Liz Cheney got the medal.
Elizabeth L. Cheney for putting the American people over party.
At this point, President Joe Biden and former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, Republican from Wyoming, the vice chair of the House Select Committee investigating the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol, were holding hands during that standing ovation. The White House says the Presidential Citizens Medal is awarded to citizens of the U.S. who have performed exemplary deeds of service for their country or their fellow citizens. As mentioned, there were 20 people getting the medal today, including former U.S. Senators Chris Dodd, Ted Kaufman, Nancy Kassebaum, Bill Bradley, former Congresswoman Carolyn McCarthy, Eleanor Smeal, advocate for women's rights, the president of the National Breast Cancer Coalition, Francis Visco, and late Judge Collins Seitz, whose legal reasoning helped overturn the separate but equal doctrine that kept schools segregated. But on giving the medal to former Congresswoman Liz Cheney and also current Congressman Benny Thompson, Congressman Andy Biggs, Republican from Kentucky, writing on X, Joe Biden or whoever is making decisions for him is sullying the nation's second highest civilian honor. The Presidential Citizens Medal is not for those who led a made-for-TV sham committee abetting the weaponized DOJ's targeting of conservatives. Also from AP, Donald Trump expected to hold a big Washington rally the day before he's sworn in as the nation's 47th president. The victory rally, as it's being billed, will be held at the Capital One Arena in the District of Columbia on January 19th. This is President Trump's victory rally the day before being sworn in as the 47th president. The crowd needs to be huge, read an email to supporters advertising the event. That from Associated Press. Washington, on Wall Street, the Dow down 151, NASDAQ down 30, S&P down 13. And from Market Watch, the number of people who applied for unemployment benefits after Christmas fell to an 8-month low, capping off a year of remarkably low layoffs in a surprisingly resilient U.S. economy. New jobless claims, a proxy for layoffs, dropped by 9,000 to 211,000 in the final week of 2024, the government said Thursday. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. You can find all of C-SPAN's programs on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and at cspan.org. That's also where you can get this program as a podcast, and we're on YouTube. Just search Washington Today and sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word, to get the stories making news in Washington emailed to you every day at cspan.org/connect. That's where you can subscribe. Have a good night.